Hi everybody, I'm Hub Arkush. Welcome to Chicago Football Now. On today's show, we'll start with a recap of the Bears bye week and a look at the Minnesota Vikings. We'll bring you the NFL way we hear it and tell you who to sit and who to start Week 8 in your fantasy league. You'll meet a fascinating young football player who hasn't let his homelessness keep him from being an inspiration to his fellow students. And on the way out, we'll get you the Chevy Dealers Fantasy Pickups of the Week, take a look at the other NFC North action this weekend, and get you a preview on our picks for the Bears-Vikings game this Sunday. It's all just ahead on Chicago Football Now. Folks, with the players out enjoying a long weekend off, the Bears made news by cutting arguably their best defensive player and then got to work preparing for the Minnesota Vikings this Sunday. Here to help me break it all down and try to figure out what's next, it's my pleasure to welcome in Chicago football senior Bears beat reporter Kevin Fishbain, our senior NFL reporter, I should say, Arthur Arkush. And guys, it was a bit controversial. It was a bit stunning. The recent changes, of course, it all goes to one position. Jeremiah Ratliff no longer a Chicago Bear. Now we've got Ziggy Hood here. I think the difference, though, is that Eddie Goldman becomes your starting nose tackle. We were told this week by John Fox, or actually Vic Fangio, Ziggy Hood's not even going to play the nose. He's going to be out on the end. So, Kevin, two stories here. Ratliff gone, and they're still dangerously thin up front.
They are, because you got to remember, Ego Ferguson got placed on injured reserve before the Ratliff whole situation went down, and Ego Ferguson was, running with the starters at times. So, a lot of emphasis on Jarvis Jenkins, Eddie Goldman. Keep an eye on Will Sutton. Will Sutton's someone we saw really flash in the preseason, early on in the season before he injured his elbow. So that's someone who, if he's healthier, one of those end spots could really help out. The key is going to be how they handle the nickel, because that's where Ratliff was. He was almost always in the field, that defensive line.
Real quick, we'll go to the Missouri Tiger here. Ziggy Hood, what kind of player is he?
Solid. I mean, I think that, had a nice run in Pittsburgh as a former first rounder. I don't think he made a lot of splash plays, but they weren't necessarily looking for that in the 3-4 as the 5 technique, his natural position. So a really good run stuffer, and didn't work out in his second contract, got hurt with the Jaguars, but still young, and he has that pedigree that Ryan Pace loves and tries to target to maybe compensate for some of the missed draft picks before he arrived.
All right, guys, the Bears talked a lot about self-scouting and evaluation during the bye week. We did some evaluation too. Key players to watch in the second half of the season for different reasons. Matt Forte and Alshon Jeffrey on the offensive side. Can Jeffrey stay healthy? Is Forte slowing down? On the defensive side, how will Goldman do now that he's the focal point of that front? And Antrel Rolle. Arthur, I'm going to come to you first. Can Antrel Rolle come back and make a difference? He really wasn't before the injury.
Yeah, he's going to have to. He's obviously, not a young guy, and he's in a deal that was heavy front-loaded, so he needs to perform. Adrian Amos is doing really well, but they need that sort of continuity, that leadership from Rolle, and obviously there has been a lack of impact plays, no turnovers from the secondary. That's the kind of thing they'll be looking to Rolle for as soon as he's healthy. He did say the ankle is going to be an issue that lasts throughout this season.
I think Eddie Goldman will be fine. I like him. I like what we've seen so far. But Kevin, on the offensive side, we can't predict if Alshon Jeffrey will stay healthy. Should we be concerned that Matt Forte's average per carry has gone down every week of the season?
It's been a rough couple of weeks for that running up game. I will put more of that on the offensive line maybe than Matt Forte, because you've got a lot of guys shuffling around. Remember, you got a rookie at center now. You got Vlad Dukas who struggled at right guard. Maybe we see a change there on Sunday with Patrick Omameh. Charles Leno better in pass protection than run blocking. But I still think Matt Forte is one of the best backs in the league. And I imagine as the year goes on, it gets colder, they start running the ball more. They're still going to feed him, and I still expect him to be productive.
All right, guys, Vikings to watch this Sunday on offense. Everybody knows to watch Adrian Peterson. You also want to keep an eye on the quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater. Stephon Diggs, if you haven't heard, the next big thing at wide receiver, Kyle Rudolph, their tight end. Matt Khalil's bounced back, Kev. He's not having a bad year at left tackle.
No, he's probably not the weakest link on that offensive line like he used to be, because they have some new starters there. So he's really had to anchor that front. And the Vikings are going to try to run the ball. They're not going to try to spread things out. But you mentioned Diggs. They can really stretch the field. They could blow the top off of the defense with Diggs and Mike Wallace going downfield.
All right, guys. Now on defense, one of the guys that fascinates me is Sharif Floyd. It would be nice to watch him. He'll probably be out with an injury, but Everson Griffin has become a monster as a pass rushing right end. Anthony Barr, an outstanding young player, starting to develop. And Arthur Harrison Smith may be the best safety in football right now.
Yeah, his versatility is outstanding. He means so much to Minnesota, and just the different ways they can use him, whether it's blitzing or defending the run near the line of scrimmage or patrolling center field. This is a defense that's loaded with former first rounders. There is a ton of homegrown talent. And last week it was fun to watch Mike Zimmer unleash the blitzes. He saw an early deficit. The Lions got after him in the first 2 possessions, and then he just brought pressure from every single direction, not just the double A looks you're accustomed to. It came from everywhere. They ended up with 7 sacks, 13 quarterback hits. That's one thing that will be on the Bears' mind this week.
You know, Kevin, the other common thread with these football teams, Rick Spielman, the general manager, George Payton, his assistant, they got their start here in Chicago in the 90s. They were brought in by Dave Wanstedt and Mark Hatley. They've done a really nice job. This team's been built through the draft.
They have, and Arthur mentioned what they've done in the first round. They've traded back into the first round a couple times to get some of these guys late, like Xavier Rhodes, who's been kind of their shutdown corner of late. And he mentioned Harrison Smith, who's been a great player, Anthony Barr as well. And they don't have that great quarterback. Bridgewater, they hope, can be great one day, but he's still got a long way to go. So you build your defense. That's worked out so far for them.
It is interesting. We'll get back to the Vikings on the back end. I love what they've done everywhere, but I'm not positive about the quarterback. We'll keep an eye on Bridgewater on Sunday. Right now, a quick break, but when Chicago football now returns, we've got the biggest stories from around the league, and it's all about your fantasy team and who to start and sit and claim this week. That's coming up next.
Welcome back to Chicago Football Now. It's time for The Way We Hear It.
Yes, everybody, this is The Way We Hear It. Some of the hottest news, scoops, and rumors from around the league, and we're going to start down in Dallas. These are not scoops or rumors, this is news, but it looks like that locker room could be ready to implode, particularly when the owner, Jerry Jones, is talking about Greg Hardy, possibly the leading felon in the National Football League, being a great leader and inspiration to the rest of his team as he puts hands on an assistant coach on the sideline. Arthur, we've talked about this locker room in the past. You've got Hardy, Rolando McClain, Joseph Randall, Des Bryant. Yeah, one troublemaker after another. They're in a nosedive on the field, and Hardy lost it on the field last week, and people around the league saying, how can the owner compliment that?
Well, because is anything ever going to amaze us with Jerry Jones anymore? I mean, I can't say I'm surprised, but I do think that obviously Greg Hardy is completely out of control, and how Jerry Jones can continue to enable this guy who's clearly not well right now. I know what he can do on the football field, but what he's doing on the sideline and what he's been doing within the media is just an absolute joke. It's hard to believe that it's only been 12 months. Jerry Jones is the reigning executive of the year in the NFL, but the roller coaster ride that team has been on, from the positive draft to some of these signings, and now Joseph Randall being AWOL this week, it's gotten really ugly in Dallas.
They've got the Seattle Seahawks coming to town this weekend. They've got to get a win. Tony Romo will not be back soon. They hope to get Des Bryant back this weekend. How about the Detroit Lions? Radical changes on the offensive coaching staff. Joe Lombardi is gone. The offensive line coaches are gone. They hand the offensive line to the tight ends coach, and Jim Bob Cooter, the quarterback coach, now the offensive coordinator. A lot of people think that signals trouble for Jim Caldwell, but remember, in 2012, he was in Baltimore when John Harbaugh fired Cam Cameron midseason, put Jim Caldwell in charge. They went and won a Super Bowl. Yeah,
wouldn't that be nice for Detroit to make that kind of turnaround? But you're right. He knows what that kind of change in offense can do. And remember, Jim Bob Cooter is somebody who the Bears wanted to interview for their offensive coordinator job, and the Lions blocked him. So they feel very highly about what he can do. There's so much talent there. And we saw the points they put up against Chicago. You got Stafford, you got Calvin Johnson, Eric Ebron, Amir Abdullah, Golden Tate. You got to be able to score more points. But they have a long way to go. And Caldwell's got to make sure this has to work if Caldwell wants to keep his job going forward.
Yeah, he's not in trouble now, but come the end of the season, if this hasn't turned things, then he is in trouble. Guys, thank you very much. That is The Way We Hear It. And folks, enough of the real stuff. Let's get you ready to win in your fantasy league this week. That's what we all look forward to. Let's talk about some players ready to sizzle. How about Leonard Hankerson against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Chris Conley versus Lions. We've got some young wide receivers here. Mike Wallace takes on the Bears. Michael Floyd gets a crack at Cleveland. And Ted Ginn Jr. against Indianapolis. Kevin, I was so impressed with Ted Ginn last Sunday night in that game. Where did he come from?
Well, I think when he was my fantasy pickup of the week a few weeks ago, Arthur, I mean, that's clearly kind of set him on this path. And I'm happy to be of help to Ted Ginn Jr., but he's been very good and key for that Carolina offense that was missing receivers. Michael Floyd with a big touchdown catch for Arizona. That offense, as that keeps rolling, as other defenses key on Larry Fitzgerald, I think that's going to open things up for Michael Floyd. And briefly on Mike Wallace, if the Bears focus too much on Diggs or Peterson or Rudolph, they're going to forget about Mike Wallace, still one of the best deep threats in the game.
All right, Arthur, let's talk about some guys who need to grab a little bench because it isn't going to go well for him this weekend. James Starks is banged up. The running game in Green Bay not working. Eddie Royal gets that Vikings defense for the Bears. Isaiah Kroll, the running back back for the Browns, sees that Arizona defense. Alfred Blue steps in for the injured Arian Foster. And Colin Kaepernick, what is going on in San Francisco?
Well, let's start at the top. It's a rough go for people that were rushing to pick up James Starks after his 100-yard game. He started ahead of Eddie Lacy before the bye. Now all of a sudden they come off the bye. Eddie Lacy is off the injury report, and James Starks is on it with a hip injury. So you'll want to hold off on him, I believe. Eddie Royal is back and healthy, but he's going to get Captain Munnerlyn in the slot in Minnesota. He's been playing really well. Alfred Blue, that whole Houston backfield, I think is a disaster, and they throw the football so much. And with Colin Kaepernick, he's not getting a lot of help from the offensive line, but they just don't seem to be very confident in him. They're not pushing the ball downfield. He doesn't have consistent weaponry. He's the kind of guy you're not going to want to roll with. He's not using his legs enough either at this point.
All right, guys, I'm going to run quickly through some guys who are worth the risk. We're not saying absolutely, but these are guys you do want to take a look at because of the opponents. Roddy White, Charcandrick West, the running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. Kyle Rudolph, again, the tight end against the Bears. David Johnson, another running back taking on the Cleveland Browns. Ronnie Hillman actually has come on a little bit in that Denver Bronco running game. These are guys who we're not promising you anything, but they're in the right situation this weekend, and that's what makes them interesting. Guys you might want to look at if you're not sure who your flex player should be. Let's put it to you that way. Guys, we thank you for all your help. Next up, we're going to sit down with a young football player at Woodstock North High School who did more than just show up this season. This is a story you got to see. Stay tuned, everybody. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Since the start of the high school football season, we've been hearing stories about a young homeless boy who's taught an entire community about how much it can mean to keep showing up and play football. Let's meet Wolfgang Kemp and hear his inspiring story.
We were sleeping on couches for more or less with a family, and then they couldn't support us. So we ended up sleeping in church sites around Woodstock until, you know, we got a temporary, like emergency housing with pads in the A building. And then we worked our way up to B building, which is transitional housing.
Many students and many staff members didn't know exactly what Wolfgang was going through because he carries himself in such a positive, proud way. Many came up to me afterwards and they said, "Wolfgang's homeless?"
I think one of the things that we've heard the most is that 5.5-mile walk from pads to here and back, particularly during the summer and during the heat. Was there ever a day when you were in the walk and you asked yourself, why am I doing this?
Yeah, there's those days because, you know, it's pretty long. It takes like a few hours, like maybe 2 to 3. So there's some downtime. I've had days where, you know, I'm just like, I'm done. I got to sit down. And then again, there's those days where I just like, I got to get home. I got to eat food and I got to go to sleep. I got to, you know, make it to the next day and so on and so forth.
Everything you do in the off season is voluntary, you know, that we can't make the kids do things, but how many kids can have any reasonable excuses when you have a young man who's walking 5.5 miles one way to camp, you know, unbeknownst to us for a long time, you know, things like that. It doesn't give kids a lot of excuses.
Are there other students without permanent homes in the school?
Yes, there are.
And so Wolfgang's story, I would hope, has shined a light on the needs of all those students.
Absolutely. And I think there's been not just donations, not just for Wolfgang, but there's been people have had that same thought process that you had. Well, if this is happening with Wolfgang, how many other students are in this same sense? And when people get those numbers, I think it shocks them as well.
He's been donated a used car. Obviously, it's beneficial for him, but I think it's beneficial for the community. I mean, I think the sports team is something the community should rally around.
If I'm having a hard day or if things are bad, I think about Wolfgang and what he has to do. And I stop feeling sorry for myself and I push on. And I know that's come from some of his fellow classmates and that's come from his fellow teammates as well. And so I think that they've rallied around that in their own lives, not just in what he's going through.
I've had some days when I was living at pads like things will never change, but now things are changing in front of my eyes. So, you know, my goal is to be successful in whatever I do in the future, and that's what I set my heart to.
As a coach, you get caught up in winning and losing like anybody else, and you know, like your fans, like your players. But it's just a reminder that sometimes it's important to know where kids are coming from.
He's making these sacrifices to be a part of a greater good, not for himself, and he doesn't ask for anything. He doesn't ask for any pity or anything like that. He does it because that's what he's going to do, and I applaud that.
You just keep going forward. You you can't really look back and, and the things that you've done and things that you've been through. The only thing that you can do is just move forward and continue to, set new goals and achieve new things and just continue to work hard.
Wolfgang, we really appreciate you taking time out for us. We hope that this has been a really great experience for you and
it has
lead to big things.
Thank you. I appreciate that you give me the time of day.
All right, well, thank you for coming.
No problem.
Folks, I'm not even sure where to start here to try and explain what this is really all about. Wolfgang is a remarkable young man. He's got a great personality. He's funny. He's glib. He helped us make the piece, came up with suggestions, and kept talking about his schoolmates, his teammates, and how that's the important part of the experience to him. Something else that popped out of here, when you've only got 4 minutes, you can only tell so much of a story, but people tend to wonder, well, how do you get homeless? They might want to point a finger here and there. They might want to say, well, somebody let him down. We had hoped to interview his dad, Wilbur, but he works such long hours and was so busy we weren't able to find the time in order to get this on the air. But he is a department manager at Walmart. It's not as if his parents disappeared on him or let him down. Unfortunately, a tough family situation. They came apart, they lost the house, but they're working hard to rebuild their lives, and this kid is just unbelievably impressive. Also, before I want to go, our producer, Dan Mott, this was kind of a personal project of his. Dan, that was beautiful. Wonderful, wonderful job. When Chicago Football Now returns, we'll have our Chevy Dealers Fantasy Pickups of the Week, take a quick look at the Lions' trip to London and the Packers' epic clash with the Broncos, plus our picks for the Bears and Vikings games. That's all coming up next on Chicago Football Now.
Chicago Football Now is brought to you by your Chicagoland Northwest Indiana Chevy dealers. Drive what Dan Hampton drives. Go to ChevyDriveChicago.com today.
Welcome back to Chicago Football Now. Rejoining me on set, Kevin and Arthur. Welcome back to you guys as well. Each week on the show, the guys and I will let you know who we think the best player is to pick up for your fantasy team. And it's time now for the Chevy Dealers Fantasy Pickups of the Week. My Chevy Dealer Fantasy Pickup is the Green Bay Packers defense and special teams. Going a little different direction here. The Denver Broncos offense has been horrible. Peyton Manning has been horrible. They've run the ball a little bit better lately, but I'm looking for a big day for that Packer defense and maybe even a big return or two. Kevin, who have you got for us?
My pickup of the week is Jets quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't know if you guys know this, he went to Harvard, so he's very smart. Going to Oakland, a tough trip, but the Raiders' pass defense is not that exciting. Fitzpatrick has thrown multiple touchdowns in 5 of his 6 games. And the other thing, too, if you're an owner like me who had Sam Bradford who's on a bye, you don't want to start a guy like Derek Carr against the Jets, some of the other tough defensive matchups, go with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's been pretty steady.
All right, I know Arthur's Chevy Dealer Fantasy Pickup of the Week. He didn't learn from Dad. Don't put yourself out in front of Bears fans, but go ahead. Give it to us anyway.
Yeah, it's Vikings quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. We know what this Bears defenses look like. It's allowing the 5th most points to fantasy quarterbacks this season. Bridgewater is playing his best football this season. It certainly has, it's not by accident, it's coincided with Stephon Diggs' explosion. He's pushing the ball downfield. Yards per attempt is up over the past 2 weeks, and I don't have a great feeling about this Bears secondary right now. Maybe an opportunity to capitalize for fantasy owners.
All right, guys, I don't know if you all have been paying attention, but we've actually been doing pretty good with these, so you might want to look at those guys for your fantasy lineup this weekend. Now, let's take a look at the other NFC North games. Kevin, we're going to start with you. The desperate Detroit Lions and the now slightly less desperate Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know where that win over Pittsburgh came from last week.
Yeah, that was pretty surprising. Maybe if Ben Roethlisberger played, maybe they win that game. But boy, the NFL, when they put Lions and Chiefs in London, it was a bit controversial because this is a Chiefs home game that's going to be played in London. But you figured these are two teams who'd be in the playoff hunt and not where they are now. So it's an early game. I'm not sure how many people are going to be excited about watching it, but we talked about the Lions, new offensive coordinator. We'll see how that offense works against the Chiefs offense that's pretty bad. So the Lions defense has got to pick things up. But you're right, two desperate teams, and we'll see what happens when they're across the pond.
All righty, interesting times right now in the NFC North. Arthur, we go back to 2010. You get the first game of the decade, the 6-0 Green Bay Packers visiting the 6-0 Denver Broncos. People are pretty excited about this one.
Yeah, no doubt. First time it's happened in 8 years, a meeting between two 6-0 teams, and it's the matchup everyone's been waiting for, sort of. It's the number 1 and number 2 scoring defenses in the NFL. Obviously, it's also the reigning MVP versus the NFL's only 5-time MVP. Peyton Manning struggling right now. The Green Bay defense playing very well, but both teams coming off the bye both teams should be healthier. So it's going to be interesting to see if Denver can kind of establish something offensively, maybe going to the no huddle more often. And then how does Green Bay kind of reacclimate with Devontae Adams back? Eddie Lacy is healthier. This should be a real slugfest, and one, as you mentioned, I know everyone's really excited to see.
And the Sunday night treat. This is one that even Bears fans are going to want to get a full dose of. So we will look forward to those games. But most of all, we're looking forward to Bears-Vikings on Sunday. Let's take a look at the keys to victory for the Chicago Bears. It starts with playing on the lead, guys. They've got to dictate the Vikings' game plan. If they get on the lead, it's harder to feed Adrian Peterson. Keep Jay Cutler upright. Make AP earn every inch, every yard he gets. And Kevin, no Viking big chunk plays. That's a problem if you let it happen.
Yeah, and that's what the Vikings have done the past couple weeks with Stephon Diggs, with Mike Wallace, is they have that ability when teams stuff the box against Adrian Peterson. In their first 5 games, the Bears are pretty good about not allowing big plays. They didn't allow anything longer than 34 yards. Against Detroit, they allowed 5 plays for more than 34 yards. So this defense, they really could use Antrel Rolle back on the field to help his safety and not let anybody get behind him. But they got to make sure that they don't put all their focus on Peterson, because that's when Bridgewater will beat him deep.
Yeah, and Arthur, AP is great. He's having a good year, but he's had some great games and some kind of games. You wonder who shows up this week.
The past few have been kind of games, as you put it. But the problem with AP, or at least for opposing defenses, is he'll do nothing. He'll have a bunch of runs for 0 yards, even negative yardage. All of a sudden, boom, he explodes for 50 or 60 yards. The Bears are aware for that. They have to be on point for 60 minutes. And then the one area of the Vikings defense that's a little susceptible is their run game. So we'll see if Matt Forte can turn it on.
All right, guys, quick picks. We'll come back this way. Arthur, you can go first.
It's just too much talent with Minnesota. I think it's going to be 23-20. The Vikings, the Bears will keep it close, but Vikings pull away late.
Kevin, what do you got?
I have a weird feeling. John Fox is pretty good off a bye. Fangio, Gase, extra time to kind of create a scheme for this one. A lot of field goals, 2 bad red zone offenses. I have Bears 20, Vikings 19.
All right, guys, I've struggled with this one a little bit for some of the reasons that you've talked about. Yes, the Bears should give a big performance. The Vikings are the better football team here. That's what bothers me. I think the Vikings are getting really good, as a matter of fact. So I've got Minnesota 28, Bears 19. Guys, thank you very much. That's it for this week. We want to remind everybody, don't forget to pick up your copy of our Chicago Football Weekly Insert, absolutely free every Thursday in your Northwest Herald, Daily Herald, Chicago Sun-Times, and other great newspapers around Illinois. And finally, don't forget to check us out online at chicagofootball.com and at wciu.com/sports. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all again next week.